Great. Welcome, everyone. This is the Board Executive Committee meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District. And today is February 4th, 2021. And we are starting on time at 12:30. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Yes, this is Becky Fang, recording secretary taking roll. President Rosario.
Here.
Director Corbett.
Here.
Director Coffey.
Here.
Members of Parks District staff participating in this meeting include Carol Victor, Carol Johnson, Jim O'Connor, Juliana Shermer, Matthew James, and Rachel Arbios providing support. Today's Board Executive Committee meeting is held in accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order allowing for board members to participate in standing committee meetings remotely. We are providing live audio and video streaming. Members of the public can provide comments three ways: live via Zoom, by submitting an email, or leaving a voicemail as noted on the agenda. This information can be found on the agenda, which is posted on the district's website at www.ebparks.org. If there are no questions about the meeting procedures, we can begin.
Great. Thank you very much, Becky. And so that brings us to our first item of the day, first and only item of the day. And the Regional Parks Foundation Annual Report for 2020. I'll turn it over to Carol Johnson.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am Carol Johnson. I play a dual role with the district as the Assistant General Manager of Public Affairs and the esteemed pleasure of being the Executive Director of the Regional Parks Foundation. And I'm really happy today to bring this annual report to you. We have a very unique relationship together between the Regional Parks Foundation and the East Bay Regional Park District in providing private funding to the Park District to support programs and environmental initiatives and many other types of activities that benefit the community at large to learn more about nature and engage in nature. Today, I have with us Jess Brown, who is our president of our board, and he's going to present the annual report to you. And just a sneak preview, we're very excited that this is our 10th anniversary of sustained revenue growth, consecutive revenue growth for the Regional Parks Foundation. So with that, Jess, I would like to invite you to make the presentation.
Thanks, Carol. And I'm going to have Juliana, our Chief Administrative Officer for the Foundation, run us through the PowerPoint. So I don't glitch on any technical difficulties. President Rosario, Directors Corbett and Coffey. Yeah, our accomplishments, and I would say our joint accomplishments between the Foundation and the Park District were quite, I won't say exceptional, but definitely surprising given the challenging year that all of us had with the pandemic. And I think while the challenges were great, you'll see they created opportunities and surprising benefits that we'll go over. So starting with the first slide with staffing. You may recall in 2019 and even 18, we had some challenges keeping the staff of the foundation up, and that created challenges for Carol and Juliana and the team, but we are happy to report in 2020, 100% staffing was in place. Again, thank you to the elected board as well in supporting the foundation and some of our appointments and so forth. And that's real critical because while the volunteer board of directors, which myself and Les here on the call represent, it's really the dedicated staffing that pulls the heavy weights and fulfills all the implementation of the ideas and thoughts that we all have collectively together. And so here, I think this is a PSA announcement related to, of course, the COVID response and so forth. So just that was our first one we wanted to hit off the bat. Let's go to the next slide. We are really about fundraising. That's what foundations are supposed to do. And I'm happy to report that we were actually well ahead of goal, and large of that was from 3.1 million coming for the East Contra Costa Habitat Conservancy, which I'll drill down here in a minute. But we were at 290% of goal. And we did some adjustments of goals as soon as we saw in the first and second quarter with the pandemic and the impacts to membership and so forth. We'll get into those as well. But overall, at 290% of goal. In terms of the East Contra Costa Habitat Conservancy Endowment, we received 3.1 million in October 28th. That was a little over $1 million more than we had anticipated and budgeted for, hence the contribution to 290% returns. And our finance team, and again, in partnership with finance teams at the district level, we invested those funds immediately at UBS on November 2nd. And we received about 11% return just in the couple of months between then and the end of the year. So timing is everything. You don't want to be sitting on money. And hopefully the Conservancy was happy that they awarded the Regional Park Foundation to manage their endowment fund. So that's a good out of the chute. Not everything was as good as we had hoped. But membership program, actually, we'll drill down on that as well. We did do a little bit better than our revised goal. And actually, it wasn't too far off our actual goal prior to the pandemic. Grants, though, however, we were hit pretty significantly. You can see over almost 50% or more drop there from what we had, or even our revised goal. But on the flip side of that, our individual and corporate donations were up. Even when you pulled out the 3.1 million for the endowment, that's still well ahead of the 400,000 revised goal for individual and corporate donations. Bequests we usually don't budget for, but we did receive a bequest from a family for $137,000. Our campship appeal, despite not doing camping this year, it did do well in the appeal, and we almost hit the $80,000 goal in our year-end appeal. Again, we're still counting up, but we're in exceeding goal there. So overall, given the pandemic, I think a solid year nonetheless. Let's go to the next slide and go down to some of these things. Again, membership, it started out pretty bad. We were down, and Juliana, you correct me, I want to say, or less, I want to say north of 30% in the first few months, but we ended 2019 16% down in terms of numbers of members. We did have an increase in donor circle, which is actually the direction that Leslie and the committee on membership wants to move memberships away from just a parking pass and fishing license. It's more towards a way to express support for the regional parks through really through donations. So I think we're moving in that direction. No small feat, the foundation moved its membership operations from Peralta Oaks to the home offices, and at the same time laid the groundwork for a launch of corporate memberships and free membership programs in 2021 and beyond. We'll go into some of those as well. Moving off membership for a little bit, one of the key things we did do in 2020 is at our November 2019 annual foundation board retreat, we inaugurated the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and that's led by Keith White from our chair, our board, and that turned out to be quite a fortuitous move, of course, with the Black Lives Matter and the social messaging that we all thankfully received and a readjustment on. And we'll talk about future things that we've been doing there. But we had quite a bit of participation on that committee with many of the board members on it, as well as President Rosario and Mona Ko from the district. So I think we'll have a good, I know the district, you all as the elected board is also working hard in diversity, equity, inclusion. We'll keep in lockstep with you all to make sure that the Park District and the foundation continue to deliver strongly in this area. We'll go to the next slide. And please interrupt me if you have any questions. We did launch a new initiative on Juneteenth, committed to providing free memberships to underserved communities, Black and Brown youth and families. This is not only in 2020, but going forward. We're really rethinking our mission as providing access for all, is really moving in toward providing not just access, but a sense of belonging, and that the park districts are theirs. And we all here on the phone, and hopefully those in the audience know that, but it's more than just taking that for granted. We want to really break that into our institutionalize it into the foundation tenets. So this will be an ongoing program, and that represents about 10% of our membership revenues will be dedicated to this going forward. Let's go to the next slide. These are the organizations that are receiving these 750 memberships, the initial ones. I won't go through all the different organizations, but I'm sure you recognize many of them in our greater community served by the Park District. And we'll go to the next slide. The program support, this is an interesting slide because we all know we didn't do a whole lot of swimming this year in 2020. But we did provide life jackets. That's one of the many things that we do provide. And hopefully 2020 will show a year, particularly with vaccines and so forth, perhaps a return to that at some point. And if not, we'll be ready for 2022 for sure. And so forth. But the big surprise, we'll go to the next slide here. And this is in the area of opportunities, from a very big challenge to opportunities, is our interpretive and recreation programs really did an incredible pivot. And we got several slides on this and various programs, moving from the physical presence in the parks to virtual program. Now, I'll have to say this slide here shows that even prior to shelter in place, that the Parks and People program was already committed to providing a virtual programming insight for 3 parks. That turned out to be quite insightful, because I think that became kind of the mantra going forward, and probably for the rest of this year, and may just be a mainstay going forward into years to come. So again, no pun intended, but a shot in the arm. Given the challenges, able to pivot and move toward virtual programs. In this particular case, almost 7,000 connected through our parks through the Ohlone Village experience. And if you haven't seen it, it's worthwhile checking that out. Now let's go to the next slides here. Of course, in addition to the virtual experiences, our program teams, or East Bay Regional Park District program teams, have created various ways to enhance that virtual experience. In this case, creating 500 toolkits that the foundation was able to help fund to provide for youth and their families to continue that learning experience beyond the virtual environment and exploring their parks. Let's go to the next slide. Again, the message here is reallocating funds from regular program, pre-shelter in place, to virtual program, digital media equipment production, staffing, training, to provide that really cutting edge content. Youth in particular are quite, how shall we say, connoisseurs of the virtual environment. So I believe our program, or the Park District program teams, have really stepped up their game to provide that creative virtual learning experiences for teachers, for classrooms, and for those connoisseurs of the virtual environment. I'll go to the next slide. This is on the planned giving side. I mentioned the $137,000 from the Billy and Karina McKinley Trust. Those were unrestricted funds. Those will go to tremendous use, no doubt. And then we did have on our planned giving events, we had 4 estate planning seminars. You may recall we were having challenges of having folks coming to our physical seminars in 2018 and 19, and we're thinking, like, what can we do differently? What can we do differently? Well, the shelter in place created an atmosphere via Zoom that has enhanced our attendance. In this particular case, we had 72 attendees per event, and then on average we were averaging about 18 in the physical events. So I think we're on to something that we'll expand on in 2021. In terms of capital projects, it's all about the fundraising, but then what do you do with the fundraising? In addition to the program, we have the capital projects, and of course you may all recall we've had 5 visitor center projects ongoing, funded in part by the Wayne and Gladys Valley Foundation's grant of $1 million. We completed the Tilden sediment ponds in 2019, you may recall. we completed the Black Diamond mines in 2020. And when I saw that, I said to myself, was that this year, last year? I guess it was. It seems so long ago, but 2020 was too long a year. Let's hope 2021 is not. The remaining 3 programs are almost there. Here's a picture of the 2020 capital projects for Black Diamond mines, coal mine exhibit. And let's go to the next slide. On the governance side, we welcome 2 new board appointees. Bob Brown, who's director of the Bay Area Region and California Regional Affairs for Western States Petroleum Association. And they're a major, very, very consistent funder for the foundation. And Nick Dahigia, who here is listed as executive vice president at the Oakland Zoo. You may know him probably, but you may also be aware that he, as Dr. Parrott retires this spring, he will become the new president and CEO of the Oakland Zoo. So we'll already looking at synergies there, learning about foundation practices, best practices, and just a very high level of abilities on our board of directors. I think, and then our next slide is all the board of directors that we currently have supporting the foundation, and thanking you for your partnership. In terms of 2021, our priorities will be focusing to continue messaging with the community's engagement, particularly related to virtual events and, of course, COVID public service announcements. We're doing a refresh on our communications. We're doing internal analysis of our capital plan. We have not forgotten the Tilden Center. We will, that got delayed in part due to the COVID-19, but we'll regroup with that so that we keep on track. We know that's a long-term engagement and takes many years of planning and preparation. So we won't lose ground there. We will draft an agreement with the Botanic Gardens. We work well with the Botanical Gardens and their supporters, but we want to make sure we get that well documented. And for 2021, we are expecting somewhat of a flat year in terms of the efforts that we'll be doing, similar to what we did in 2020. We're not out of the woods yet, of course, with the pandemic. And that will do a large part of dictating what we'll be doing. But I think we've got it down now pretty well. So fortunately or unfortunately, and we'll grow on our strengths front that developed in 2020. And with that, I think that ends the presentation portion of our annual report. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your support.
I was on mute. Thank you very much. That was a great report. Questions from the board? Dr. Coffey?
No, I just want to compliment the foundation on its work. I wasn't aware of the membership program for underserved communities, and that strikes me as a wonderful program. And I know in my own family, we're passing out memberships all the time. They're very well received, and I think that's a marvelous program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I should point out that Juliana and Carol turned that around literally in one day. I think 19th was a Thursday, and we had the press information and such out by the 19th, which was the next day. So fantastic job there. And obviously gotten a lot of good feedback on that program as well.
Great. Director Corbett.
And no questions, just my compliments on a very successful year that looked a little gloomier earlier in the year. So congratulations for finishing strong, and a great report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just have a couple of questions. One is a lot of your focus is definitely in serving our underserved communities, but what is our definition of an underrepresented and underserved community?
Yeah, I'll start out a little bit and I'll hand it to Carol. It's a great question, Professor Rosario. As you know, there's many definitions out there. And I think that's one of the things we'll be not struggling with, we're really focusing in on. Our immediate focus, of course, is in terms of the membership programs that Judge Coffey, Director Coffey mentioned, is for our Black and Brown communities. But we look at access for all in terms of different age groups, different ethnicities, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and I think it's important that we do be clear on what we mean by underserved. So I think that's something we'll work with you in the Park District to keep in lockstep to have. Carol, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, actually, and it's a great question, Director Rosario. Because I think there's a lot of topic about this these days, correct? From the Park District and the foundation standpoint, we both look at it at this time from an income-based standard. Juliana can speak specific to it, but I'll say this. We look at communities that are 40% or below the free and reduced priced lunch programs, particularly for students. We also target audiences that are in income-based populations that we are and the Park District are specifically interested in engaging more with those communities, whether they're communities of color or they're communities that are near our parks, but with less access, places like Richmond, Ashland, Cherryland in the San Leandro area, Oakland, parts of Oakland. And then we also look at subcategories, and the subcategories in our case, we look at include veterans, disabled, seniors, that kind of thing. But I would say our primary focus with respect to that question, what does underrepresented mean? Really is looking at it from an income specific strategy at this point. But I'd like to ask Juliana Shermer if she'd like to specifically add any additional information.
Sure, happy to. So historically, I would say the Regional Parks Foundation's mission or overarching umbrella has been the access for all. And when we look at funding any program for the Park District, that's the lens with which we look at the applications and how we're going to fund it. So in working with our program partners, we're looking for, as Carol said, especially in working with the schools for any sort of scholarship or transportation assistance, are they a Title IX school? And if so, they need to qualify at 40% or more of their students being free and reduced price lunch. If they qualify in that area, that's when we would step in and give subsidies. So over time, that's been where a lot of our funding has gone to provide those types of support. That again includes Camp Arroyo, that includes the Parks Express, that would include the Fish Friends program. And then as we've evolved a little bit over time, we're also looking at geography. So whether it's coming from some of our funders or coming internally from Interurban Rec or the boards, are there areas of our community that are underrepresented or underserved? So parts of Oakland or Ashland, Cherryland or Richmond. So are there pockets of our community that aren't coming to programs at the same level as in other areas? And a way that we can provide funding so that they're having the same level of access as their counterparts. Further, then we've recently in the last year and a half or so drilled down even further, and we've said, what are some underrepresented people? That would include students, people living with disabilities, veterans, and seniors. Again, these are people within our community that historically can have access issues or some limited ability. And we feel like that's an area that we can step in and provide some additional support. And finally, since 2019 in particular, our board has been looking at, again, that DEI and are there underrepresented communities of color that also could use some additional support. So in addition to us starting and launching this committee this year with our board, we're also sitting at the table with our counterparts here at the Park District and having some of these community surveys and focus groups and trying to identify if there are other NGO partners that we could partner with in helping, provide funding to create new programs or new outreach strategies. So we're there, we're at the table, and we're just waiting to kind of see what direction that goes.
Great, thank you. Is this something I want the Park District to do as well? But somewhere in, because I was looking in our budget for 2021 and 2020 that there's no definition stated. And I think, I know I have constituents that want to know what that definition is. And so if it's out there stated somewhere in our documents, that would be very helpful for people too. And then last question is, so how do we track that we're being successful? Are we keeping track of the demographics of who's attending our programs and in what numbers and just general demographics of who's attending and where they're coming from, and so that we can know that we are actually making an impact.
Yeah, I'm going to pass this to Juliana and Carol. Keith White, who's the head of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, who couldn't make it today, but he has been asking that question, President Rosaro, from the get-go. And he works formerly with the Gap, and now he's at Salesforce. And from a corporate standpoint, he's used to a regimen of understanding and being the measure of just what you said. And while I think our gut feel tells us we collectively are doing many of the right things. How can we measure that and be sure? And then more importantly, take the limited resources that we do have and apply them in the best places. So I think we have a lot to go there, but I'll hand it off to Carol and Juliana.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in having Juliana represent this question too. There are many different ways in how we're assessing, certainly in our goal setting and working with the district, specifically in the district coming directly to us with their asks for funding and service. But most importantly, I think for us, we have to ask the question in the guise of, are we really providing access for all of those groups that Juliana was just citing? But in terms of drilling down to demographics, I'll let Juliana answer that.
Sure. So this might be a long answer, but I would say in working with the school groups, again, we've been doing that the longest. So if we're writing to external funders or looking to report out on our outcomes, we look at the school data. So we are able to do kind of an income demographic breakdown as well as racial ethnicity. And that's kind of one of the areas that we report. For a lot of our programs, we are looking for number of people served, number of students served, whether they're veterans and those special populations that we've looked for. So every year in our partnership with the district, we have the program managers in interpretation, recreation, stewardship, aquatics. They write us a basic grant proposal with the amount of funding that they're looking for, what they would like to do with the funding, how many people will be served, over what time period, et cetera. And then they give us an interim and a final progress report. So we do look at all of those and we read those. We look at any challenges they've had. Did they hit their target or their outcomes or what they were hoping to achieve? Again, historically, it's been more about, are they students? Are they seniors? Are they disabled? We have not been looking at specific racial or ethnic data. Now, that is something that we've been looking to see how we might be able to collect moving forward, especially for any of the programs that we fund that are smaller, like a scholarship for aquatics, for instance. But some of what we fund are large community outreach events, as you can imagine. So providing, multicultural wellness walks or the Hoop Nanny or something along those lines. So when you get thousands of people coming, it's a lot harder to quantify. We can give you estimates or our observations, but to specifically say X number of people come from these backgrounds, that's a real challenge. But those are the things we're working on, again, with our DEI committee and these free memberships that are specifically for underserved communities. We are building in a pre and post survey and kind of an intake form as well, as that's my word for it, but we're asking the program partners that pass those out to help the families fill those out. But, how do they identify on their, the age and race of their family and their economic status and all of those things, because it's a new program for us and we really want to make sure that we are hitting the goals that we say we're going to. So I hope that's helpful.
And I'd like to add that there are some specific examples of where we have partnered, of course, with Jim's team with INR on developing assessments where we've brought in expert folks from, for example, San Francisco State University, who've assessed some specific programs, programs like the Rangers, the Richmond Ranger program, which is a very small program, but nonetheless very targeted program for youth that are in the general Richmond area, particularly children of color. We've also worked with Nina Roberts, who's also somebody who's very well known in this category with San Francisco State as a professor, but most importantly, she is an equity expert in terms of teaching others in her profession and other agencies like ours, you know, what type of youth engagement programs we should be looking at, how we should go after, you know, the various types of organizations in the community that can help us get to the children or families that we're looking at. And then finally, I'd say a lot of the funding that we provide back to the district will be directed through the district at third-party organizations. And those third-party organizations you saw many of on the screen are the ones we don't have, nor do we have enough staff to possibly be, you know, hammering every community to find out who are the most vulnerable. But these organizations do. These organizations are developed and successful in many ways because that is their expertise. So if we're looking at targeting the Oakland community and we're looking specifically at a youth engagement of a certain age group, we're going to go and find a very specific targeted organization that works within that community, within you know, the targeted locations, if we're even looking that specific, like at Tidewater, when we're looking for specific participants to participate out in Tidewater. So we rely largely on our third parties. What we haven't done, which is I think something we will be looking at, is asking those third parties for the specific data. They know that data. And they are tracking the people that they are working with. And I think they can be very helpful to us in the future in identifying those demographics that we're all interested in knowing.
Great.
And if Jim O'Connor wants to add anything,
Okay.
he's on the phone or on the screen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Jim O'Connor, I'm the Assistant General Manager of Operations for the Park District, and under my area of responsibility is the Interpretive Recreation Program. So I think Carol and Juliana have done a really great job of covering a lot of the points. One last point, and of course this work goes across multiple divisions in the East Bay Regional Park District. One area that we have worked on, we've targeted on with our what we call our outdoor, our community outreach coordinator position. Is the idea of knowledge gaps. You know, everything we've talked about barriers. What are barriers to access, barriers for participation in programs? And one area we've also focused on with our community partners is knowledge. Do community members, are they aware of our services? Are they aware of our facilities? And so we've also done a lot of work with these community partners to educate community members about things like our Parks Express program and ways of getting to our parks from their communities, and also just orient them to our services. So we do a lot of work around providing knowledge about our services and access and what our facilities are. And then we also tie that into the Parks Express to bring those folks out to parks, to expose them to them and tell them how do you access these services, and then help them along so that in the future, they're more independent in terms of accessing our services. So that's just one area that I wanted to add in that Carol and Juliana had not touched on. But they've done a really great job, and a big focus of our work is these community partners, because they have the trust and the tie-in to the community, which takes a long, long time to develop. Right. And so therefore we leverage our work by working with them because they already have the trust and the knowledge of these communities. So that's a really important thing to emphasize, and I'm glad they mentioned that. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Director Corbett, then I saw Peter Liu had his hand up as well.
Peter, did you want to go first? Because I think you wanted to add on the conversation.
Oh, sure. I just wanted to maybe share something related from other work. I sit on another foundation board, and we collaborate a lot with some of the conservation foundations, such as the Sierra Club Foundation. And clearly, sort of equity, diversity is a huge issue amongst the environmental community, which is, obviously doing great work, but not very diverse in terms of in many measures. So I think as they do this, they are very cognizant about measuring, monitoring, and evaluation. But one thing that they have realized, thanks to a lot of consultation by, experts or people, from the social justice area, is that, this is going to be measured in decades and not necessarily year by year. So anything that we embark upon or design or want to kind of keep ourselves accounted for needs to be think on those terms. I think there have been so much momentum at the foundation in this just past year on this issue. In some ways, also, off the momentum of the society in general. But at the same time, we have to understand there's some real, sort of deep-seated issues in terms of, there's maybe lack of diversity both in participants in our park, maybe even within our own ranks. And a lot of that, is something that we need to sort of measure over a longer period. And some of which are oftentimes, as the Sierra Club itself is focusing on, is focusing on what institutions or with things, groups and institution and capacity you're building within your organization to keep looking at that even when board members term out, as we often do. So just something to I thought I'd share that because I think it's valuable observation from a number of years of work they've been doing. They've been sort of invested towards this.
Great, thank you. Director Corbett.
So I'd just like to agree with the statements Peter just made. It is definitely great to see the momentum at the foundation and at the Park District as well. And I agree that these are long-term projects and a lot of work to be done, but I think we're on our way. So that is all very positive. I just wanted to ask, I've asked this before in other contexts, but the discussion today makes me think that the foundation in partnership with the Park District might be the place for this to happen. I have seen with other organizations and entities who are interested in serving the community and addressing DEI issues, mapping. For example, I believe Kaiser has done some very important mapping throughout parts of the community, and I've especially focused on some of the mapping in the Southern Alameda County unincorporated areas. But I'm wondering, I think it would be helpful for our planning into the future to be able to either access some mapping that is done by other organizations or use some of their data to build our own mapping system with regard to understanding where economic disparities may be present in the communities that we serve as we try to make sure we deliver services with equity. And I thought that perhaps maybe we can start looking in that direction. That'll allow us to help us make decisions with regard to, equitable sharing of resources and addressing the needs we've been talking about this morning, as a matter of fact. So some mapping in the future, I think, would be a really, really great resource for us.
Director Corbett, I think that's a great idea. I think, to see it visually on maps is really important, and it's very impressive to see what we are doing. And yes. So we are working together with the Park District and the GIS department in putting some of those maps together about some of the existing programming that we're doing, overlapped, of course, with those communities that are under-resourced. so that we can see where we might have some gaps. And that certainly will be helpful for the foundation in helping to direct more funds to go toward those particular areas.
Great.
Great. Carol, Victor?
Hi, Carol Victor, Interim General Manager and District Council. Hi to everyone at the Regional Parks Foundation. This is a great work and a great partnership with the Regional Parks Foundation, and the Park District and the Regional Park Foundation got to the same place a little bit independently of each other, but very synergistically with DEI. So I think the board members are aware that we're doing our diversity, equity, and inclusion community outreach. We expect to kick off the community portion of that effort, I think in about late spring or summer. Right now we're kicking off the workforce element of our DEI plan. And then we also have an initiative on our inclusive community engagement program, which is just getting kicked off. And we are, I think it's really important for us to see who's not a part of the conversation, and how do we make them a part of the conversation and listen to groups who haven't been represented in Parks and Recreation. And so these two efforts are kicking off, and I think they're going to lead in very nicely to where the board will be in a couple of years, which is looking up at the next update to our master plan. And all of this is, we are in a data-driven society. And so I think in terms of all of everything we've identified today, but I would say it's across many disciplines within the district, is our data collection, our visitation numbers, who we're serving, mapping, like Director Corbett pointed out. It's just becoming increasingly important. And we as an agency are working on that because we need the performance measures, and then we need the metrics. The metrics that show us that we're meeting those. And so it needs to be measurable. So those are all things we're working at. And when I say multiple disciplines, because the having those numbers plays into things you don't even anticipate. I think I mentioned to Director Rosario with the Costco Busan oil spill when we were doing the natural resources damage assessment. Had we had really good statistical data on our park visitorship, that would have that translates into dollars coming into our parks. And same for a number of grant programs that are out there nationally and with state funding and federal funding. So it's really important. I think it's recognized throughout the agency, and we are working on methods to improve that throughout the agency.
Great, thank you. And then I have just one last question. It does, Director Corbett just triggered her question on mapping. Where are we getting our current economic data to determine which is considered low income? Is that from the 2010 census, or is it from more updated criteria or surveys?
Juliana.
I mean, officially, I think the 2010 census was the last one, but you can get kind of the updated annual estimates through various websites. So I know whenever we go out and do different grant applications, usually it's about a year or two behind, but that's the data that we're looking for. And you can pull up information by census tract and zip code as well. So it just kind of depends on what we're looking to fund and what information the funder's looking at. I think people, different funders look at things differently as well. So sometimes it's census data and sometimes things that they're looking at.
So what is the cutoff as far as what determines what economic range is considered
poverty?
Yeah.
So I'm going to be hesitant to give you that answer here, but I'm happy to send it via email to everybody that was participating, because again, I think there's federal poverty level, there's 200% of federal poverty level, there's usually some sort of an adjustment that's done for living in the Bay Area. So it just kind of depends. And then there's the Title IX school information. Not every metric is going to be exactly the same, but we can send you some of those and some of the different things that we look at.
So, so you're saying that depending on the grant, depends on the survey you use or the metric, or?
So sometimes, I mean, again, for us, if we as the Regional Parks Foundation were giving an unrestricted grant to the district, often it's for a school group. So we're looking at Title IX information and are they 40% or more of free and reduced price lunch? So that's kind of our qualifier for the most part.
Okay.
If we're going out and looking for external funding, sometimes they have their own stipulation of what is considered low income. So we have to look at that and then do our own analysis to see if the community we're looking to serve would qualify. And so again, that if they're a national or international funder, they might use federal poverty level, and then we have to go in and do the adjustments for Bay Area. So it just kind of, it depends.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. I had no idea.
It's
Great.
a lot more complicated than one would actually think.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah, it is a lot more, there's a lot more layers than I would have thought, but yeah, it totally makes sense.
And then it looks at number of people in the household. I mean, so there's, one for individuals, then it kind of extrapolates from there. So
Yeah. Thank you for that. It really helps a lot. Any other questions, comments? Great.
I would like to introduce formally two of our other leaders of our foundation board that I unfortunately did not do earlier. Please forgive me. Les Houserath, who is our vice president, and Peter Lou is our vice president, and Les Houserath is our secretary. And they are both amazing and talented chairs of several of our committees and have been with us for several years now. So I want to thank them for joining. Thank you, part of our executive committee team, along with Jess. And I'd also like to thank Juliana for being here. She's really the glue that makes everything work in her role as Chief Administrative Officer, in keeping things kind of humming and percolating along. And so we couldn't do it without her for sure. So I wanted to make sure I acknowledge those people.
Great, thank you. So that leads us to any further board comments? I will just comment that I think this was a very opportune and timely presentation, and I'm really glad we had the discussion about how we get our numbers. and I think and that IGM, Carol Victor is right. We've synergistically have come about our DEI independently, but we're now, I think, we'll be poised to move together. We have to be together, and I look forward to that. And thank you all so much for your work and your dedication. And thank you.
Well, thanks for having us again. This is always our exciting part of the year for us, being able to present our results, and especially when they're really positive, as this year has been, to wrap up a whole decade of growth. We're very excited about moving forward into a second decade. So thanks so much for your support.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to, sorry, Carol, I didn't want to cut you off. I just wanted to say thank you to both boards for, allowing the Regional Parks Foundation to play the role that we do. Also wanted to say, in addition to what Carol said about us having our 10th year of consecutive growth, in 2020, we had committed to giving, to tripling program support for the district. So we'd given anywhere between $250,000, $275,000 a year. In 2020, coming off the heels of our 50th anniversary, we went big and decided to give over $600,000. And even amidst COVID, the Regional Parks Foundation Board knows and it's continuing to give that support and just shifting it to virtual. So just wanted to say thank you to all of you as well.
Great. Thank you all. Great. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank
Hey.
you all again for great
You all.
report and good work.
Yeah, thank you.